Good evening, everyone. It looks like people are joining us, and we'll go ahead and get started. Good evening, and thank you for joining us for the AUPO Surgical Curriculum for Ophthalmology Residents webinar. My name is Shahzad Mian. I'm a professor of ophthalmology and visual sciences at the University of Michigan Kellogg Eye Center, where I've been on faculty for nearly 19 years. I am currently serving as the Vice Chair for Clinical Sciences and Learning. It is my pleasure to introduce our panel presenters for this evening. We have Dr. Stephen Feldon, who is the Executive Vice President of the Association of University Professors. He's currently a Professor of Ophthalmology and Associate Vice President and Director of Biomedical Research Development at University of Rochester School of Medicine and Dentistry. We have Dr. Jeff Petty, who is an Associate Professor of Ophthalmology and Visual Sciences and the Vice Chair of Education, Residency Program Director, and Medical Director of Global Outreach at the University of Utah Department of Ophthalmology and Visual Sciences. We have Dr. Stacy Pinellas, who is the chair of a national prospective study of pediatric optic neuritis and runs an NIH-supported research group evaluating systemic outcomes of pediatric eye diseases. Dr. Pinellas has also served as the residency program director for UCLA Department of Ophthalmology. Next, we have John Reed, who's co-founder of Immediate Action Medicine, a medical education company, and serves as the learning designer and project manager for the AUPO SCOR program. Last but not least, we have Dr. Grace Sun, who's currently serving as the director of the ophthalmology residency program at New York Presbyterian Weill Cornell, and is co-chair of the NYPH Cornell Graduate Medical Education Committee. She's the current president of the AUPO Program Directors Council. Next slide. So tonight's agenda is in front of you. We will be going through the basics of aspects of the AUPO Surgical Curriculum for Ophthalmology Residents. After our talks, we'll transition to our discussion section, so please stick around. Next slide. Use the Q&A function to ask questions and communicate with the panelists. This webinar will also be recorded and will be available to everyone within a week. We're going to do a quick poll as we get started. Please select the title that best describes your role. Let's just give us some idea of who is attending the webinar this evening. So it looks like over half are program directors, but we have some other educators from AUPO who are on as well. Welcome, everyone. So we'll start off our program with Dr. Feldon, who will provide an overview of the SCOR program.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. I'm delighted to be here. I would like to know that that there is a financial disclosure that I act as a consultant for the AUPO. Next slide, please. So this is just a brief history of the SCOR program. Several years ago, industry approached us at AUPO and wanted to know if we would take over sponsorship for some of the wet labs in order to remove the perception of industry bias. We took this to the Program Directors Council, and they stressed the importance of developing a standardized surgical training and assessment program for residents, and using long-distance learning in addition to wet labs, where the wet labs would be integral to a much more comprehensive course. The consensus was reached that the ideal surgical training and assessment program would be this unified curriculum combining in-person and virtual education. From my standpoint, this is the largest and most expensive program and extensive program that AUPO has become involved in, and it couldn't have been undertaken without cross-industry support. Next, please. From our perspective, this provides an equal opportunity for all ophthalmology residents to access outstanding standardized surgical training and assessment It provides learners with access to multiple surgical platforms, as well as to basic as well as advanced techniques. And the standardization of in-program and in-person assessment is a huge protection for our public. Success is a shared responsibility, and so I want to first of all give my special thanks to the unwavering commitment of the surgical training and assessment committees that work under the leadership of Dr. Mian. Also, thanks to Alcon, BNL, and J&J for their generous financial commitment to this program. And of course, in anticipation, special thanks to all of you tonight who are going to be overseeing the curriculum implementation at your sites. Thanks for the opportunity to welcome you, and I hope you enjoy what you're going to see over the next hour or so.
Thank you, Dr. Felden, for this overview. Again, if you have any questions, please remember to type these into the Q&A area, and we'll get to those at the end of the presentations. Now we'll move on to the SCOR program background and mission. I'd like to just kind of review this with you. We all know that our goal in residency training programs is to really train physicians who will be comprehensive ophthalmologists. Next. There are many ways to assess surgical curricula. One of the ways that the Accreditation Council of Graduate Education supports us in doing this is by defining the minimum surgical numbers. However, we all know that there's wide variability even within individual programs, but certainly at a field level, there's wide variation even for surgical procedures such as cataract surgery, where although the minimum number is 86, we know from the data that the range is somewhere between 83 and nearly 400 cases per year. Next slide. We also know from those who are in practice, this is a survey from the American Academy of Ophthalmology of those in practice less than 5 years, that nearly a third felt that their surgical skills were somewhat or not well, that they had somewhat or not well trained surgical skills. And they asked for additional training, or felt like they needed additional training in a wide variety of surgical areas. Next slide. In addition, the AUPO has spent some time looking at how program directors and chairs feel about their graduates and recommending them to the American Board of Ophthalmology. And as you can see from the slides here, 10 to 14% of chairs and program directors felt that, or 10 to 14% of the residents were not going to be recommended for certification by the American Board of Ophthalmology. Next slide. And a good number of these, with 25% of program directors and nearly 50% of chairs saying were due to surgical competency. Next slide. We also know from asking our educators that they have high expectations of our graduates, that nearly more than 55% of them feel that residents should be competent, that is, to be able to perform safely and independently for cataract surgery, and 44% felt that residents should be able to perform complex and teach others with respect to developing expertise in at least cataract surgery. Next slide. And this is not really just for cataract surgery. There is an expectation that our graduates should be able to perform suturing and glaucoma procedures, including MIGS procedures, as part of their training as a comprehensive ophthalmologist. Next slide. So in summary of what we know that surgical training is highly variable among programs as assessed by surgical numbers. We know that some residents may not have surgical competency to be eligible for ABO certification, which is a huge problem. Residents are expected to develop competency in approaching expertise, certainly in cataract surgery, but really in exposure and skill development in a broad area of subspecialty skills. Next slide. This variability of surgical competency among ophthalmology residents can lead to adverse patient outcomes. Next slide. And the lack of definition of what is surgically competent, other than being able to safely and independently perform surgery, creates variability in proficiency among board-certified ophthalmologists. The lack of accessible educational resources to support surgical competency also creates variability among board-certified ophthalmologists. Next slide. So this is what led to the development of the AUPO SCOR program, with a mission to provide a standardized system of surgical training and assessment of competency for ophthalmology residents. Next slide. The main principles that we have been following in developing this program include accessibility regardless of institution, an equitable representation of equipment and supplies, i.e. we want to make sure that residents are exposed to a broad range of platforms for equipment and types of techniques. We also want to make sure that we have objective assessments of the instrumentation. We want a data-driven curriculum that will allow us to make sure that we're providing the learning that the residents need, both in an online and in-person format. And again, this is entirely built for residents, therefore it is learner-centric and designed for their level of training. Next slide. The curriculum has multiple components. They are the essential components that which we feel are minimum requirements for competency. But as a organizing committee, we felt that it was important to recognize that we need an advanced curriculum as well, which focuses on those who choose to pursue surgical disciplines and want advanced training even during their residency programs. We're also building instructional materials which are designed to be responsive to the needs of the residents. They provide just-in-time learning as well as guided paths of development that learners can utilize throughout their training. Next slide. The overall mission is to develop this curriculum over a long period of time because we know it needs to be comprehensive and will require a lot of effort. Our goal in this first year has been to publish our first cataract module, which we are releasing and sharing with you tonight. But we have 3- and 10-year goals in terms of adoption of the curriculum that we're developing as for all programs, and we're going to monitor how well it's received and incorporated into training programs. Next slide. Our initial curriculum, which focuses on advanced cataract and anterior segment skills, is also fairly broad. It covers Phacodynamics with a broad platform of instrumentation, focuses on advanced nuclear disassembly. We are covering areas which we feel are critical challenges when it comes to advanced nuclear disassembly techniques, and those areas that make those cases more complex, as well as some additional elective skills that are necessary as part of an advanced curriculum. You'll hear more about this in the next section. Next slide. I really want to thank all our great faculty who have supported us in developing the curriculum to date. This is a large project and we need a lot of help in doing this, and we've been very fortunate to have an amazing team that has worked tirelessly over the last year to develop what you will hear about tonight and moving forward. So thank you to everyone, and we look forward to also asking for additional support. This is an ongoing project, as you saw, and we will need more support. So we're looking forward to asking you to help nominate additional faculty as well as participate yourself in additional curriculum development. Thank you. Next up is John Reed, who has prepared a video demonstrating how the SCOR program learning management system works. We'll go ahead and play the video.
Right. Welcome to the AUPO SCOR Learning Management System. Right now, we're just on the landing page. So as a student, I would arrive at this page and then sign in and get to my dashboard. Like any program, there's the standard profile account that can be found at the top. Below, you'll begin to find the content. Here is the PGY4 curriculum, which we'll discuss in a moment. Below that is the student activity, any courses that the student is currently registered for or currently participating in, and they'll be able to access that from here as well. Additionally, there are learning paths or curriculums and any courses that have been completed so they can reference that. Additionally, if there are any certificates that are granted at the end of a course, they'll be found here, as well as any third-party certificates such as an AHA ACLS card that can be uploaded here as well. An interesting part of our learning management system is that it not only has the standard distance learning modules, it also has the ability for in-person events and live stream events via Zoom. So for example, this here is the upcoming November wet lab at the Academy's annual meeting, in which students would be able to register and then also find any instructions, any prerequisites, anything like that to prepare them for that actual meeting. Additionally, there's the ability to then have attendance and any administrative functions that you'd expect for an in-person event. The same thing can be found for any type of live stream events. So we can think that maybe there is a great lecture a professor would like to do and do it in a live stream format. Residents will be able to sign up for that, participate in it within the actual learning management system, and then also that could be recorded and eventually uploaded to the system as an on-demand video. Below these upcoming events here, you're going to find our general catalog. Now, this is all the content available in person, live stream, on demand, and anything else that you can think of will be found here. This is particularly useful for the ability to look at the calendar. So for the upcoming events, we'll be able to look at it through this view. Additionally, on the left-hand side here, we have the ability to filter the catalog in different ways. So if you're right now interested in, let's say, introductory topics, just getting spun up on a new topic at the very beginning of a part of the curriculum, you'll be able to find those courses here. Or if there are specific management skills that you're looking for or equipment and supplies, you'll be able to find that there. Additionally, the ability to filter by course, event, or learning path is built in natively. Something that's interesting and important to note about this is that although we have in-person and live stream events, we also have multiple different types of on-demand content for our learners. The standard one would be your regular text with illustration, which we'll go over in a moment. But I do just want to highlight briefly that we also have produced our own videos, particularly for the different PHACO platforms. So here we're in actual module, and specifically this is a module for the orientation to the Bausch and Lomb Stellaris Elite. In the course, we go over all different parts of the machine, setup, overview, software settings, including how to set up and manage anterior vitrectomy. And this is done for all the three major vendors of phaco emulsification. So just for example, we can just see here on vitrectomy setup, this is what it will look like. And what we think is really amazing about this is sure that there are these types of videos available from vendors, but to have this be produced by AUPO and led by an actual professor, I think it gives it a real important perspective that the students will be able to use. So that's a completely custom produced video course. If we go back to our learner dashboard, you're going to also find different types of courses, particularly having to do based off of illustrations and images, more text-based. So a good example of that would be the stop and chop technique for us. Again, on the left-hand side, you're going to find all of the content in an outline form. And generally how all of these specific courses, particularly when we're trying to teach surgical skills, they're going to follow the same structure, in which we have introductory material having to do with the title, going over any of the objectives, overview of what it is, the benefits and risks of that procedure, and then any other preemptive learning that we would need to prepare for the actual demonstration. The next section would then be the demonstration, where we go into the general steps of the procedure, any prerequisites, indications, contraindications, warnings, equipment that's required, and then we actually get into slideshows at each major step of the procedure. This probably looks best when we actually are on the next step. So this is when we are looking at sculpting the groove. And each sub-step of this procedure is identified thoughtfully through the help of all the SMEs and the authors to make sure that we have very granular information to make sure that actually how you are doing this procedure is correct. And this brings you all the way through, including with goals, warnings, tips on how to get the procedure done. Go into the actual cracking of the nucleus. And we believe that in terms of the content, the ability to have all of these illustrations for each little step should be really helpful, hopefully, for a learner, particularly using this angle in the sense that it's really difficult to sometimes show 3D spatial awareness of where these instruments are just from the top down. So being able to show it from a different angle can be really helpful. So we show the entire procedure step by step by step. And once that's complete, we additionally then cap it off with a well-produced video that shows that exact procedure following the steps provided in the demonstration. So we believe that this is a great way to introduce people to specific surgical skills, starting them at a very basic level with text and any introductory material, building upon it step by step, and then showing it in real time with a video. But those are for more well-produced courses, and we recognize also that there's different types of learners, and really a lot of the time these residents are going to want just-in-time learning, or they're going to want a lot of volume ultimately of case videos that are recorded. So we also have the flexibility to have different types of maybe less highly produced videos, but more of them. So the idea is that as more and more videos are received for the program, they'll be produced in here, and we'll have a very, very large catalog of narrated shorter courses. This is somewhat of an example from actually one of the Bionico reps who was trying to show how we can use their eye model. Again, it's a lower quality course, but the ability to get it out there quickly, have it on here in the system, and the ability for the residents to be able to find it, I think is exceptional, that we can have a very large catalog of different content. So that's the general catalog. Now, again, I want to bring your attention back to the PGY4 curriculum. And this is the prescriptive path that we believe is going to be the best option for learners as they're going through their PGY4 year. We begin that with Phacodynamics, going over all of the platforms. And then we go into our Advanced Nuclear Disassembly module, beginning with the principles of chopping, introduction to horizontal chop, introduction to vertical chop, stop and chop, and then the quick chop technique. As we have more modules coming out, they'll be added as well. Next up will be the zonulopathy modules, and then shortly after the posterior capsular rupture and vitreous prolapse. Additionally, we'll be launching the small pupil white cataract iridiodialysis and IOL exchange, as well as M6, MIGS, and intraoperative aberrometry. And we believe that this is, again, the flow that the learner should go through for their year, but we recognize that these residents really may not have the time to follow that. They might just need what they need the night before, let's say a case. And so this is just, again, a recommendation, but they're able to jump around and do whatever they need as they want it. The last piece I'd like to talk about here is the assessments. And what we've been able to do is working with our assessment committee, and our assessments are built upon the SCOR model of a graduated level of competency. And so here, for example, we can take a look at the quick chop vertical assessment. And this idea is that this type of assessment will be actually on an iPad, particularly at the wet lab. But at the same time, students will be able to use this for self-assessment in the wet lab on their own or after a case. And there's a lot of different ways we're going to be able to leverage this. It's the possibility also that a student can upload a video of their case to the platform, and then a AUPO SCOR proctor or a member of the program at which they're from can then score that based upon the assessment using these tools. So going through that, we have the instructions, everything that's needed to do this. And then we get into each step. And the idea is that, again, it's on a graded scale. So let's say I'm competent, competent, intermediate, competent, intermediate, competent, 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 and each one has the criteria on it. Once that's complete, after the case, be able to review. So if, let's say I was a professor or faculty member reviewing, I would just make sure that everything's correct. Particularly if we're in a wet lab setting where we just want to make sure that we are verifying that this is correct, put in a pin, and then that's going to generate a score. So this student generated 21 out of 22 points for a skill level of intermediate, and then they're able to click next one. Additionally, that's going to generate a great deal of reports for us. That will be very helpful to be able to draw further data and objectivity from the program. All right, welcome to the AUPO SCOR Learning Management.
Great. Thank you so much, John. To go into the application of the distance learning, we turn to Dr. Jeff Petty.
Hello, friends. Wonderful to see you, or not see you, at least connect. Again, I'm in Salt Lake City, Utah, coming to you this evening. You can go to the next slide. So perhaps what some of you or many of you are thinking is, you know, another virtual resource. And indeed, it is another virtual resource. And one thing that COVID has done is there has been this proliferation. There's certainly no shortage. However, there are a few differentiators here that I think are really important. So I'm not going to take you through kind of a little bit of a recapitulation or show you the site again, but what I want to show you are the things that I think can be really useful to us as programs. Next slide. So first of all, this is universal comprehensive quality. Again, we've talked a lot about that comprehensive, but you know, as I'm working with residents, I'm not entirely certain what they have read or not, or what they have prepared as they're coming to the operating room. And largely that's because there are so many resources. I have a recommendation. I've got a couple other faculty who have very strong different recommendations for preparatory work. And this is something that can be consistent. You know what it is. And again, the quality is really impressive. We'll go next slide. I do apologize for the spelling here. This was pulled straight from the website, Carolyn. But these are really, really exceptional ophthalmic educators. These are people who educate for a living. They know the type of content, the quality, quantity for these for this level of trainee. We can go to the next slide. And again, you'll see, just we'll kind of click through a couple. Go ahead and go to the next. Again, you know, as educators, we'll start with objectives. Next. Benefits, risks. I mean, that's something that, again, may not be found in the typical surgical video online. Next. Prerequisites. Next. So, proper industry exposure. What do I mean by that? You know, as academic institutions, we are, you know, appropriately, you know, cognizant and mindful of relationships with industry. What should they look like? What shouldn't they look like? How do we make sure that our residents are not unduly influenced? And by the same token, we really have an obligation to also help them be good stewards of industry and help them understand what are proper and good and healthy relationships. And where most programs are going to have at most two, but most likely just one significant platform for residents to train on, we really do want them to have exposure to all of them. And that's because they will be going out to a practice, perhaps operating for the first time on a machine. And wouldn't it be nice if we could give them exposure to all those machines and all those different major platforms before they head out? So we can go next. Indeed, all the major platforms are represented with opportunities to grow towards additional surgical phaco platforms or additional you know, platforms in other surgical areas such as vitreoretinal. We can go next. Finally, documented competency. One thing, again, that we struggle with oftentimes is simply documentation, right? Okay, well, what is the preparation for surgical, for being involved in surgery? And in this particular case, we now have an opportunity where we can say every graduating resident across the country will have gone through this basic or maybe even more advanced curriculum online, including, you know, as we'll get to a little bit later, wet lab. So we can go to the next slide. You know, here you come to this section, go to the next slide, perform this section, go to our final slide, and sure enough, we have assessments, right? We have assessments that can actually show, yes, they have indeed performed this, they've done this, final slide. You can go to the next slide, sorry. And, you know, and even here you can have certificates, right? Certificates of completion that can go in their portfolio, you know, zipped off, sent off to ACGME, and we're all in a better place for it. So those are the things, again, just to review. This is something that's really comprehensive, universal, available to everyone. It really allows them to get, you know, appropriate and proper industry exposure, regardless of whatever platforms you have. And then this is an opportunity for all graduating residents to have some consistent documented competency. Thank you. Look forward to seeing you all at AUPO in the winter.
Thank you, Dr. Petty, for your great presentation on the applications of the distance learning platform. Next, Dr. Sun is going to discuss the skills transfer workshops, including our pilot program experience and what's up ahead. Dr. Sun?
Hi, everyone. Good evening. So I wanted to talk a little bit about our skills lab. Perhaps this is the most familiar to all of you, as we've all sent our residents or have done some skills labs ourselves at our own institutions. And what I wanted to do is make sure that you all understand that this particular skills lab that we're running at the Academy is trying to align what they've learned already in our distance learning portion, what Dr. Petty had discussed, and translate them at a hands-on skills lab at the Academy and use them on the 3 different platforms that we've discussed. So what we've learned in our 2 pilots, one that was held in Michigan and one that was held in the spring in New York, were some of the skills that were relevant to practice, which particular models to use, which simulated models, how to create a schedule for our residents to actually run through the didactics program, as well as how to organize the assessments that are so important to the curriculum. So this slide shows how it will run at the Academy. So at the Academy, we are limited to 72 learners, and during the end of this webinar, Shazad will talk about the process of nominating your residents, and it runs the whole day. So it starts at 7 a.m. and ends at 6:30. There are essentially 4 blocks, 4 groups of 18 learners. It's going to be on Friday, November 19th, that's lab day, and the residents are expected to arrive Thursday evening. There will be a pre-lab orientation webinar to ensure that they understand what is expected of them, to understand how to utilize the learning management system that John Reed had discussed, as well as what particular skills that they will be practicing and being assessed on November 19th. Sorry, November 12th. Thank you. Next slide, please. So I'm going to go through the 4 different modules, and the first one is the PHACO lab. So there are, again, 3 different PHACO platforms, and this is sort of the meat of the skills lab. So it's broken up into 3 different modules, and in each module there is a particular skill. So in module 1, we've decided divide and conquer with zonulopathy management with the insertion of a CTR. And in that second part of the first module, they'll have a different lens to work on, and they'll practice stop and chop and insert a sulcus, load and insert a sulcus lens. And then they'll have a couple of minutes of a transition and go to module 2 on a different platform, where they will be able to learn or practice their vertical horizontal chopping, and also work through a small pupil module and inserting a 1-piece IOL, as well as removing the IOL by using forceps and a cutter. In the third module, we're going to work on anterior vitrectomy, ACIOL insertion and suturing, as well as the MyLoop. And one of the things that we've learned in the pilot is that in this session, the PHACO lab, where it's actually essential to have one-on-one teaching. So we're going to have one faculty per resident to maximize learning and teaching opportunities. For these modules, we'll be largely using the Bionico eyes, and we had in our pilots tried a few different simulated eyes, the Bionico eye, the Philips eye, as well as the Simuli and some others. So after much deliberation, we've decided that these modules work best on this type of eye. Next slide, please. So the second block comes in two parts. The first is the MIGS part, so minimally invasive glaucoma surgery lab, which will last about 80 minutes. There are 4 different MIGS platforms to utilize. In our pilots, we did 3, and we may have time for 4. And they will have the pre-learning videos to go through prior to the lab. Next slide. And in the second part of this advanced anterior segment skills lab, they will choose either iris repair, iridodialysis repair, or intrascleral lens fixation using the Yamane technique. So what we learned in the pilot is that despite being senior residents towards the end of the year, there was still a bit of a struggle trying to sort of use the instrumentation to successfully do this in a short amount of time, which was about 45 minutes in our pilot. So they will choose one, and if they're able to complete, they can do both of these skills. Next slide, please. And the third block is our advanced suturing and intraocular knot tying, and this can take up to 2.5 hours. For some of you who have been able to participate in Dr. Ogawa's lab, this is Dr. Ogawa does a sort of macro suturing lab at the Academy that's very popular. And in our pilot, he did a mini session, and this was very, very popular and useful from the feedback given by the senior residents. So these are some of the skills that Dr. Ogawa and our faculty will be going over with the residents, on uneven knot tensioning, dangle knot, the intraocular knots, and a few others. Next slide. And then it's a long day, so we decided to do a break room with IC simulators with an anterior vitrectomy module for those who will be able to do the entire day. So there will be food served, and I know that it's a very long day, so we would encourage your residents to maximize their learning opportunities at the Academy. Thank you. Next slide.
Thank you, Dr. Sun, for sharing the upcoming lab as well as our previous pilot experiences. I just want to also one more time emphasize that the date is November 12th, Friday at the Academy, and we'll make sure that that's shared again as well. We're now going to move on to Dr. Pinellas, who will be reviewing the curriculum assessment portion. Dr. Pinellas.
Thanks, Shazad. And I just want to thank the rest of the committee and give a special shout out to Dr. Carl Golnick, who was really instrumental in forming the assessments for this project. Next slide. So the purpose of the assessment portion of the SCOR project is to provide formative feedback to all of the resident participants. We're not going to fail anybody. It's not like a pass-fail course, but the purpose is that we wanted to find a way to provide real-time standardized feedback for the residents that they may not get at their home program because of the breadth and depth of the faculty that they'll be working with at the SCOR project. The evaluations are going to be required as part of the course, so all residents will come back to you as a program director with a folio with evaluations. Next slide. The assessments were created by a team of ophthalmologists and are loosely based on the SCOR evaluations, but more specific to the individual skills, and we tried to keep them pretty simple to click through. Next slide. I have an example to show you. This example is for the Stop and Shop section of the SCOR project. So each evaluation has a task, and this one, is just described as disassemble and remove a nucleus using a Stop and Shop technique. And the conditions that the residents do it under are provided, as well as the standards of what we expect, which in this case is to remove the lens from the capsule without injuring the patient and complete the steps in order. So all of you as PDs would receive this condition and standard, and then the evaluation, which is on the next slide, and will be done on an iPad. It looks scary, but it's really, once you sort of get used to it, it's very quick. It takes like a minute or two to go through with each resident. So the way it would work is that the faculty at the station who's working on this skill with them at the end of that station would go ahead and score them on each step of Stop and Shop as either a novice, an advanced beginner, or competent. And there's a lot of words here because we want it to be really standardized. So every resident across the country should know each step of Stop and Shop if they're an advanced beginner or competent. And that's not just from their program standards or compared to their co-residents, but actually compared to a national standard. And then at the end, they'll get a score. And then they'll know whether they're competent or not, and their program will receive this as well. Next slide. The logistics of this are still sort of in the works, and we'll see how it goes at the academy course. But right now, we think that the faculty will have these assessments on an iPad, and certain faculty may be specialists in scoring certain skills so that it's easy for them to remember the skill. We want to make it a shared responsibility. We don't want the faculty to have to track students down. We want the students to come to the faculty and say, oh, we didn't do the evaluation for Stop and Shop. Let's go through that. This is a really good way for residents to start to understand, if they don't already, that feedback is really for them and it's formative. Next slide. The long-term goal of this project is that we'll have this sort of standardized formative feedback that's provided in a summary to both the resident and the program at the end of each of these wet labs. And programs will be able to follow that over time for their residents. If they incorporate a new method of teaching into their program, they can see how it affects their scores in general moving forward. Next slide. And that's all we have right now in terms of assessment. We're looking at other sort of more advanced ways of scoring videos and other exciting things. But for now, these standardized forms are what we'll be using, and we look forward to providing you with that data. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pinellas. Next up, John Reed will now cover the onboarding process for the learning management system. John?
Hi, everyone. Pleasure to be here this evening. After about a year of hard work by the entire SCOR team, we're really excited to be able to start rolling this out. And so here are the next steps for gaining access to the learning management system. You'll receive an email, a sign-up form, and this is going to be first come, first served. So if you're really interested in this, we recommend getting that form in as quickly as possible. Beginning in the middle of August, we are going to roll out the beta test period. That'll be one program, and we're going to try to learn as much as possible from that program to make sure that it's a smooth rollout for the rest. Beginning in the early part of September, we will then take on 3 more programs with the expectation that in the early part of October, with some time building up to the academy, we'll be able to get all the programs on all at once. I'll be working with each program individually to make sure that everybody gets onboarded and make sure that they have all the tools they need to succeed with it. Next slide.
Thanks, John. We're going to spend a few minutes talking about the surgical curriculum and the workshops that are coming up in terms of how you can participate and how your programs can participate in the program. Next slide. So once again, just as a reminder, we are going to have our next major lab, skills transfer workshop lab at the academy meeting. The focus will be on November 12th. We will be asking faculty to come on Thursday, November 11th, as part of their training and set up for the workshop on Friday, November 12th. And again, we'll have 72 attendees who can participate in this program. We are already planning a follow-up lab, which will be bigger, and it will be based in Florida. And our dates at this point are the end of February. We'll share additional information as we develop this. And this will have you to have the ability to send up to 117 residents total for the second one. Next slide. So we have come up with some criteria for which residents are eligible to participate in these workshops that are listed here. These are open to AUPO member residency programs. The residents must be PGY4 residents because these are intended to be advanced surgical skills that we're focused on. And since the first one is in November, we have a minimum experience requirement that we'd like to have with cataract surgery minimum skills of 50 cases. And also, because we have a mixed component, we want them to be either primary surgeon or at least assistant surgeon in 5 cases for MIGS to participate. For available slots handled, will be handled on a first come, first served basis. Our goal is to have 1 resident participant per program. Additional residents will be considered on availability and programs who have limited wet lab resources. So we'll be taking a look at that, since the whole goal of this program is to make sure we are providing an opportunity for residents who may not have those opportunities in their own programs. So we will be considering that as a factor. More than 1 resident, again, may be able to participate from a program based on availability. At the AAO program, AUPO will be providing support for the lab to be with 1 night of hotel and round trip airfare for the resident. But the commitment will be that they participate all day, that they will be there between the 7 a.m. and 6:30 time that Dr. Sun reviewed. Next slide. For the trainers or the faculty participating, we also would like to make sure that, since it's an AUPO program, that we have AUPO member residency programs that are participating, and the faculty will be nominated by either the program chair or program director. We want the faculty to have a teaching experience of at least 3 years, and for them to be recognized for their anterior segment skills. And since the lab is covering these components, we are specifically going to ask that they are either advanced phacoemulsification skills, MIGS, intraocular lens exchange, specifically the Yamani technique, since we're focusing on that, but really a broad experience with intraocular lens exchange and iris repair. At the Academy meeting, we will be asking the faculty who are participating to commit to attend Thursday, November 11th from 6 to 8 p.m., where there will be a dinner session and review of the lab details themselves. We feel that this is really necessary for smooth flow during the workshop. We've certainly learned that from our pilot experience as well, that faculty need additional training on the models as well as the flow of the workshop in order for it to go smoothly for them to be able to teach in the workshop. We will be asking the faculty to commit at least 5 hours, that is 2 sessions through the day. And with that, we will be supporting hotel as well as honorarium for the faculty participating as well. Next slide. You know, the program overall that we've developed, as I mentioned earlier, it takes a whole village to make this run. We have a great team that has worked extremely hard over the last year. But the slide is really just to provide you an overview that we have a whole host of activities that you've heard about today that we would not be able to do without a large team. I'm going to ask John to kind of provide a brief overview of all our committees that have been involved over the last year and will be in the coming production and development of the program.
Thanks, Shazad. So the SCOR program consists of 5 primary committees: the editorial, multimedia, wet lab, train the trainer, and assessment committees. The editorial committee researches, writes, and develops the surgical recommendations and instruction for residents. The Multimedia Committee requests, reviews, and publishes media content, including videos, photos, and illustrations to support instruction. The Wet Lab Committee plans and produces in-person and virtual training events for residents. The Train the Trainer Committee provides instruction and guidelines to faculty to ensure consistency between faculty members. And the Assessment Committee develops formative and summative assessment tools to be provided for residents and faculty members. All of the committees are supported by numerous contracted staff members and that add specialized technical skills such as learning management system administration, illustration, and video production. It's important to note that all the committees work in unison towards common learning objectives so that instructional content is consistent regardless of whether it's provided online or in person. So these are multidisciplinary teams working together. We definitely need help on all of these committees, but there are certain committees that we could use more help with. Next slide. If you're interested in participating in the program, we are currently seeking on the Multimedia Committee members to solicit and review videos. On the Editorial Committee, Anterior Segment Surgeons to assist and develop, this is the Assessment Committee. Anterior Segment Surgeons to assist and develop assessment tools, and item writers for the Editorial Committee. Again, we're looking for people for all of them, but those are specific places that we could definitely use some help. Next slide.
Thank you, John. We now have time for questions for our presenters. Please remember to type your questions in the QA section. We do have a number of communication pieces that we'll be sharing with you in the coming week. Again, this webinar was recorded and will be shared. In addition to that, we will be sending out through the AUPO asking chairs and program directors for nominations for faculty and how residents will be able to participate, as well as the request to ask for additional faculty to participate in the various committees of the SCOR program. So you will be receiving additional information regarding all those areas and in the near future. There's a question regarding email, who will get the email for registration. The email will go to all the attendees of this webinar, and we will share it with the AUPO membership. Again, program directors and chairs are the ones who will be nominating for who can attend. We did want all the programs that are nominating to at least either attend this webinar or to view a recording of it, because that helps provide a background on what the program is all about, so they can make an informed decision regarding if they want to participate and send their residents.
Couple questions coming in. Since residents are expected to attend from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m., will they have 2 nights hotel? And thank you, Sonal, for the question. And I don't have that answer, to be clear. I'm reading the questions. I just, to clarify my role.
At this point, the support that we are providing is for 1 night. There's another question in here about if the SCOR assessments will play a formal role in ABO certification. We are not, although the ABO is very supportive of having programs that allow assessment of competency and development of tools for surgical training. This is not a program that is run for or by the ABO. This is an AUPO program to help training programs have additional tools for education, training, and assessment. So this is not a setup for ABO certification. This is really to help for self-assessment for residents, as well as for programs to be able to provide, get guidance on how their residents are training. Stacy, do you want to add any comments regarding the assessment pieces?
No, that's okay. You did a great job.
There's a question regarding plans to standardize resources across the programs. Jeff, you want to take that one?
Yeah, and please feel free to re-clarify the question if I don't ask this correctly. As far as the online resources go, Again, this will be available to everyone uniformly, the same assessments, the same testing. Again, so that would be something that would be available uniformly. You know, if there are questions about other type of resources, you'd have to just clarify in the Q&A.
There is a question regarding the curriculum being advanced for November, and if there, you know, if we've considered that, because it's early in the PGY4 training. Dr. Sun, you want to take that one?
Sure. We certainly have thought about that. And in our pilot in New York, there were actually a couple of second-year residents who've had done 0 or 1. So certainly too early, which is why we created the minimum of, you know, at least 50. But many programs across the nation start in their first year with, you know, residents completing their, you know, full cataract surgery then. So I think what it'll demonstrate for us is just the huge variability of how we teach, when we teach, and I think that is good for us to learn about. But we have thought about it. Some of the modules I think the residents will fly through, hopefully divide and conquer, for example, and some of them will be a little bit more challenging. So I think we focused on advanced because we also thought that there are a lot of sort of beginning cataract courses that are out there.
Thank you, Dr. Sun. And, you know, we also see that there's quite a bit of variability even within programs, because a lot of times programs have rotations where trainees may have their core cataract experience or more complex experience early, and some have it later. And so even within a training program, it's not the same between where residents are in September and May or June by the end of the training. So we definitely feel that we need multiple opportunities, because even within a program and of course across different programs, residents will be at different stages in the course of the year in their PGY4 year. So hopefully we'll be able to catch 72 people who are really ready for the advanced curriculum in November, and then have the opportunity for 117 in Florida for those who will be ready for additional work. There's a question about cost to the residency programs. So this program is developed by AUPO. Therefore, there is no cost to residency programs who are AUPO members. In fact, there is support available, as we mentioned, for the residents to be able to attend the course. And of course, the online curriculum is available to all AUPO member programs without any charge. There will be a charge for non-AUPO members. Certainly the online distance learning curriculum will be accessible, but workshops, if we have space, we will allow non-AUPO members to attend, but there will be a charge for those programs. But again, that's only if we have slots open after all AUPO programs have the opportunity to utilize the slots. Do residents need to have 50 primary cataract surgeries completed as well as 5 MIGs to qualify for participation? Grace, you want to take that one?
For the MIGs, it was an assist, and for the PHACO part, we did require 50 just because we are doing advanced. I think if, you know, there's 72 spots, so I think that hopefully we'll be able to fill those spots, but of course we can, I'm happy to talk to the rest of the committee if we're unable to. I understand that it's COVID and many of our programs may be struggling for perhaps the numbers, but that's what we're aiming for, to maximize the learning opportunity in the lab.
Looks like we are out of time. We really want to thank you for joining us tonight, and we are excited to work with you in terms of certainly helping programs take advantage of this program, including the skills transfer workshops and the online modules, and for greater participation from faculty from all the programs as well. So thank you. You'll be hearing from us in the near future regarding next steps. We appreciate your support. Have a good evening.